And away we go. It's just me at the moment. Not sure if Eric's going to join. Not sure if Risk is going to join. And I'm not sure if a third person is going to join. Either way, the show must go on. And before we get into the usual, as of this recording, I just found out that, I've talked about many episodes ago about my future chapters for the world stage, because the world is a stage. Well, eventually. So I was in this. I was featured as a supporting artist for this film, which, again, as of this recording, is now available to stream on Amazon Prime. Now, I can't give too much away, but I will say this. This film, for whatever reason, beyond my comprehension, is going to do very, very well. It has so much community support, there's a lot of backing, not just financially, and the director of this film that I'm featured in is also working on another film, which again is likely to do very well because of the community that's backing the director and the studio that the film is made by. So this is only the beginning. Who knows what more chapters are yet to come? This is going to be wild. So I'm not going to take anyone's jobs or take over the atmosphere. However, and without my consent, everyone is going to be talking about me. Not everyone, but my name is going to get dropped every now and then. More often than I wanted to. So yeah, there's that. So, new movie is going to do very well. Let's see how this goes, and let's see what stories are out in the open. TikTok star avoids jail after crashing McLaren and skipping court for almost a year. On Friday at Staines Magistrates Court, Harrison Sullivan, 24, has handed a 1-year suspended custodial sentence while wearing a grey prison tracksuit. Following the March crash, Harrison Sullivan spent 12 months in Dubai, Thailand, and Spain, continuing to post social media while wanted for failing to appear in court after crashing his McLaren in Virginia Water, Surrey. Vehicle data showed Sullivan was traveling at 71 miles per hour in a 40 mile per hour zone. Prosecutor Kane Alexander said it was going 30 miles per hour over the speed limit, while witnesses claimed at least 100 miles per hour or more. The court ordered Sullivan to wear an electric tag for 3 months, complete 300 hours of unpaid work, 30 days of rehabilitation, face a 2-year driving disqualification, and pay £18,049.47 to Surrey Police with a cost hearing on 15th of January. Why do people do this? Why do people with loads of money, loads of TikTok followers, they believe that they're above the law, they can just do whatever they want, and then, no, people are injured, now they're in hospital, which is awful, absolutely awful. No one should be in hospital to begin with. It's mental. I cannot believe that there are people like that exist. But that's what happens when you rise to fame and it gets all over your head and you believe that you deserve better. You don't need these people. You should get these to show how powerful and rich you are. Yeah, then how come the billionaires are wearing plain clothes whenever they go out in public? Answer me that. Sometimes you never know how much attention you want until you actually get the attention. And from that point on, you just don't want to drag attention to yourself anymore. Just leave the thoughts down to those who may be listening. This is a Now, I'm not saying that this crash is intentional, because, well, who would have suspect someone running over someone? Who would suspect a person driving a McLaren running over someone at 70 something miles per hour. Even you do notice someone on the street or in the middle of the road, there won't be enough time to stop the faster that you go. So that's theory out the the table. Justice shall be served. Unfortunately, it's not being served quick enough. Eventually, no, not eventually. This is the world we live in. There's nothing else that Sullivan could recover from. It's. I think personally, it's over. But in terms of his TikTok fame, he's still gonna keep going. Now, if this was a few years ago, like if he was like a YouTuber back in the 2010s, and he actually did something like that, then his career, professionally and personally, would be over. But in this day and age, with the rise of social media and hearing so many absurd satirical stories, which is very hard to tell if it's actually real or not, you could do the stupidest of crap and still continue with your life, or even continue with your career. A lot of this world is so disincentivized now. You can do stupid crap, you can cause a lot of destruction, and still have a career. That's the world we live in now. And I don't think much of that is ever going to change. Whilst there are people that will get the justice served to them, and they will pay the price, big time. But to say that they'll be caught red-handed in the act and for some kind of consequence to be hit on them right away, I think we're far past that. If anyone is going to pay the price for their actions, it's going to take months, maybe a year or two, before news of what these celebrities have done actually catches up to them. At the minimum. It could be longer, but at least a couple months, a year or two minimum, before people find out, as well as the perpetrator paying the price for their actions. Anthropic claims to have detected Chinese government hackers using their AI chatbot Claude to conduct cyber attacks on about 30 organizations. The hackers pretended to be cybersecurity workers, tricking the chatbot into performing automated tasks, resulting in a sophisticated espionage campaign. Researchers from Anthropic stated they have high confidence these attacks were carried out by a Chinese state-sponsored group. Anthropic has since banned the hackers from using the chatbot and informed affected organizations and law enforcement about the breaches. Yeah, I don't think that's going to be enough. You can't just tell organizations, we found who the hackers are, we're going to sort things out, it's all good. No, 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 you can't just put a plaster on it and then just call it a day. How on earth has it been possible for Chinese state hackers or affiliates to use Anthropic Claude AI chatbot systems to carry out cyber attacks? Better question, what kind of prompts do they use? Because this is the thing that separates the casual, everyday users of AI chatbots with the tech-savvy individuals that know their way around technology. And I've said this at least once, and maybe a couple more times after that. Well, most people use AI chatbots as if it was a search engine. In other words, Google, because before chatbots were a thing, OpenAI, ChatGPT, people looked up on Google, looked for whatever links comes up first, and clicked on that. But now, with AI chatbots being a thing, ask it anything and gives you the answer instantly. But to what extent is the answer actually answers the question someone has asked? That is what really separates AI chatbot users. What do you ask it? How do you want them to answer the question? What technicalities, obstacles, or hurdles should it consider when answering the question? That is the difference. And I think whoever these Chinese state affiliated individuals are, they're good. Very good It's bad, but their thinking is quite clever. I'll give them that. Well, it's better later than never. In fact, nah, screw it. Better later than never. At least we can learn something from this, or at least the people running the AI chatbots. They need to really think about how people answer. No, the people working at Claude or Anthropic now has to consider how their AI chatbot answers questions that users ask them. Because there are crafty people that will prompt in a particular way that doesn't look it violates guidelines, but you still shouldn't ask it anyway. And these individuals that are part of the Chinese states, they did just that. They know their way around technology, like a lot of people think China does. Although Risk, if he was here, he would say that China is a failed state, it's not going to do anything, it's not going to go anywhere. They're duped. Well, we'll see about that. I'm not disagreeing with Risk about mainland China. However, I don't see America being on top of the world or having much influence as it has now for much long. There will be a new power that will dictate and set the pace for how the world moves. Chadwick Boseman, who starred in films like Black Panther and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, will be honored with a posthumous star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame on November 20th. Boseman's wife, Simone Ledwood Boseman, is set to accept the honor, with Black Panther director Ryan Coogler and Viola Davis expected to speak at the event. Boseman passed away in August 2020 at the age of 43 after a private battle with colon cancer, much to the shock of his fans. That is so true. I was shocked when Chadwick Boseman passed away as well. And of course, he is missed by many people. Whilst even when people are no longer physically on this planet anymore, it's nice seeing that even the late celebrities are being recognized for their talent, and it will be set in stone in the Hollywood Walk of Fame for many, many decades to come. So, yeah, rest in peace, Chadwick Boseman. Rest easy. Oil prices jump as Ukraine hits one of Russia's biggest export hubs. On Friday, Ukrainian drones struck Novoro- Novorossiysk, Novorossiysk, damaging a ship, an, an oil depot, and apartments, injuring three crew members. WTI rose 1.52% to $59.58, and Brent traded at $63.88. Ukrainian forces have increasingly targeted Russian oil refining, storage, and export infrastructure using drones and missiles. Analysts say in recent months the campaign shifted to hard-to-replace refinery equipment. Emergency crews said they bought a fire at an oil depot in the transshipment complex under control after drone fragments smashed windows in at least four apartments. Novorossiysk role as Russia's second-largest oil export hub raises fear of supply disruptions amid US sanctions effective November 21st, barring transactions with Rosneft and Lukoil. Despite price spikes, the broader market outlook remains bearish as US crude inventories rise, and analysts cited warnings of a severe glut in 2026 despite short-term market disruptions. Wow, it seems like, to be honest, I've lost interest and attention of the US tariffs because, well, there's so much going on, and also I haven't heard Trump talking about the tariffs in recent times. However, one thing for sure, the tariffs are still going to be in effect, if they have not been in effect already. And of course, it's not going to be pretty for a lot of countries. And this is something I do urge to ask people. What backup plan do you have? If you do not have any alternatives outside of US relations, how are nations going to survive? Likewise, the EU, for many years until quite recently, was getting oil from Russia. But the EU said, no, we're not going to trade with Russia. We're not going to get oil from them whatsoever. And they instead getting oil from the US. But the thing is, getting oil from the US is a lot more expensive than getting oil from Russia. And I don't think the EU are going to back down from that decision. And whatever opinions people have about countries around the world, if someone is so stubborn to give in to a particular nation, well, I think that just comes to show. Now, of course, don't just be too reliant on a particular nation. You should always consider alternatives, but you can't just have one option. There has to be multiple routes in terms of trade for anything. Otherwise, prices are going to be stagnant or possibly much higher than they are right now. And especially if you don't produce your own services, which you can give to other countries, that will be just as worse. I've heard that Qatar had brought in cows into Qatar to produce dairy products that it can sell within Qatar because of sanctions, because it was being sanctioned by Saudi Arabia last time I checked, and couldn't get any dairy products from there. So Qatar brought cows in to ensure that if in the event another sanction was to happen again, make the product themselves, which Qatar has done. Now, of course, I have opinions about Qatar and other things, and many other things. That is smart to actually bring in cows to make your own dairy products. And I think now Qatar is 100% self-sufficient in making dairy products. And if it wants to sell dairy products to other countries, they can do, and they will make a lot of money out of that. Look, if a small nation like Qatar can do it, so can other countries, even though Qatar has lots of money. However, even small nations that may not have a big economy, anything is possible. It may be a stretch, it's going to be a challenge, but it can be done. I know for sure that countries can produce their own goods and services, which they can give to other countries, and use whatever revenue comes out of exports, and then to be reinvested back into the country. I believe it's the smart way to go. I can't imagine anyone who would refuse to do anything like that, because it just makes sense to have connections, cover expenses and costs for what the country has to provide for its people. But that's just me being optimistic. There's going to be obstacles in every aspect of that. Brazil rebukes UN complaints about COP30 security but boosts presence. Simon Steele, Executive Secretary of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, criticized Brazil's security personnel for failing to act when indigenous protesters entered COP30. In response, Brazil said internal security was the UN's responsibility, but increased security barriers and air conditioning to address concerns. Lula defended hosting COP30 in Belém to showcase the Amazon's climate change role, saying it is a non-issue now. The issue related to that have been secured. I can't blame security for the security personnel. No one knew how many indigenous people were going to barge into COP30. You know what? I'm glad the indigenous people did barge in and protest. And I know I've said this before, but I will say it again. Who are these climate change experts to tell people that we should do this and do that to preserve our climate, to prevent global warming, and dare I say, our environment. But yet, the indigenous people, who their entire lives have been living in the jungle, which is highly sensitive to the changes of our climate and the environment, go against COP30 and anyone that even attends the event. I would listen to what the indigenous people have to say about their way of life rather than the experts of climate change. Have they lived in the forest? Have they lived like the indigenous people many years ago or even now? This is one of the few points I would bring up about climate change. I'm aware that our climate does change over time for many, many years, but how these experts are saying that our climate does change, I'm not bought into that. And of course now, especially if you get in protests by indigenous people who are living in such natural climates and environments, which these said experts are saying we should be advocating to protect. What does that tell you? If you have indigenous people protesting against COP30 and whatever these climate change experts have to say, that should be very, very telling. I don't have to say anything on that. That should be enough to tell people what climate change is about, or at least what these experts are saying about climate change. This is only the beginning of the uprise against the climate change narrative. Now, there could be more research that supports climate change. However, given the rise of seeing the rise of protests against climate change, I think people at COP might be cooked. It's not looking good for these. This is not looking good for the experts on climate change and global warming. It really isn't looking good. I think the protest from the indigenous people is like the cherry on top. Because to have people protesting COP30 who are saying we should be protecting the forests, the wildlife, and reduce whatever usage we need to use to ensure our climate doesn't change for the worst. Now, you're doing something very wrong because the reason the indigenous people would even protest in the first place is because what they have heard and what their plans are for COP30 sound, seems like to be that this could go against their way of life, their environment, the damages it could happen. Like there hasn't been any, like there hasn't. This should absolutely worry people. If nothing, if nothing productive comes out of this, just put the fries in the bag, bro. It's over. Absolutely toast. Former Spanish soccer football boss Luis Rubiales was pelted with eggs by his uncle during the launch of his book, Killing Rubiales, at a public event. Rubiales was forced to resign last year after kissing Spanish player on the lips during the 2023 Women's World Cup celebrations without her consent. In his book, Rubiales confirmed he was the victim of a conspiracy involving the government and the profitable world of feminism. Oh boy, this is a whole can of things to open. And the thing is, actually, me and Risk have actually discussed this during the time the women. I'm not sure if the Spanish women's team won 2023 Women's World Cup, but I think after the match and celebrating, me and Risk did talk about the story the moment it happened. And although I might have some changes to my perspective, I think one thing is certain: it still stands. From my like at the moment it happened, from my perspective, seeing the footage across social media, this is going to be hard because this has been many years. I think I said something like, "Why would Henny Hermoso allow it? Why would she allow Rubiales to kiss her on the lips? If I was in her shoes, I would say, no, 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 thank you. I would not be against her if she did that, because at least she's been honest and she stands her ground. But of course, I am not against her for speaking out about Rubiales. I think at the time it happened, there are just some aspects that just doesn't add up to me, and I think to this day it still doesn't add up. She doesn't, Henny Hermoso does not have to take what Rubiales did to her, but on the other hand, yeah, actually, I think my thoughts on this is, I'm not against the sacking of Rubiales. I think there's just aspects. I am not defending no consent kissing whatsoever. It's just, if Hermoso was strongly against Rubiales kissing her on the lips, the moment the other players were celebrating and that kiss happened, I feel like she should have, and I thought she would have, and she should have at least pushed him away. So at least we know that she does not want this. And if Rubiales was still going after her anyway, then I would be against Rubiales for what he was doing, and he would have deserved the sack. That's my take on it. I don't I don't think she was. I wouldn't say assertive. I don't think she was confident enough to say to Rubiales, "No, I don't like this. Don't do this." Then I'd be like, "Okay, fair enough." But to allow that kiss to happen and then a few hours later say, "Oh, he kissed me. I didn't consent to that." Like, why are you complaining now about this? You could have done it you could have said no to him the moment he tried to do it. And that's okay to say no to someone, and people have to respect those boundaries. But this is not an attack on Henny Hermoso. I think she had the opportunity to be confident and stand her ground, saying to Rubiales, "No, I don't want to be kissed on the lips. I don't want this whatsoever." And fair enough, absolutely, it's absolutely understandable. I respect that. It's just a shame that she had to wait a few hours to actually say to her fans online, saying, "Rubiales kissed me. I didn't consent to it. He should get the sack." You could have said no to him at the time, and I think a lot more people would have backed her at the time. But yeah, given how the situation went out at the time, honestly, I think all of those elements of that event, no matter how clear in intentions or what the information is out there has been shown, it is still somehow open to interpretation. People say that Hermoso is trying to antagonize Rubiales. On the other hand, Rubiales was asserting his dominance against her, and there isn't much she can do, which, again, fair enough, but I still think Hermoso, I still would have liked Hermoso to still have the courage to stand up to him, say, "No, I don't like this." Yeah, that's all I have to say. I'm not gonna defend one side or the other. I'm not saying that what he's doing is. I'm not gonna say he didn't do anything wrong. It's just I think there's misinterpretations. There's just misunderstands the situation, and there's some aspects that could have happened if given the opportunity. And not saying that he should stay. It's just I still question why didn't you have the confidence to tell them, don't I don't want this. Please don't do it. You got to make it clear to people. And if you make that clear out in the open to the public, surely people will have to ask, what on earth is going on? And that's that. Either way, I think Hermoso is doing pretty well. Although I haven't heard, although I don't pay much attention to women's soccer football, I'd assume Hermoso is still doing very well as a player. Again, not sure where she is, but I know she's doing pretty well. If she's still playing, that is. Again, I'm not too sure of her age. But nonetheless, if Hermoso was good at the 2023 Women's World Cup, I'd assume, if she's still playing, she's doing pretty well whatever club she's playing at now. So yeah, that's that. China invests in green tech while US scales back climate policies. At COP30 this past week, Beijing and Washington presented sharply different climate strategies as Chinese President Xi Jinping accelerated green technology investments, while US President Donald Trump rolled back subsidies and boosted oil production. Xi Jinping frames going green as an engine for development, presenting it as an economic opportunity that drives clean energy industries and export growth rather than climate response. Beijing exporters dominate global green tech markets, driving trade revenue as Chinese green energy manufacturers low solar and wind costs, prompting India, Nigeria, Abu Dhabi, and Brazil to launch major projects. More than 40,000 delegates convened at COP30 climate conference in Berlin, Brazil, this past week as China's total emissions are on course to reach as atmospheric carbon said. I already have my take on climate change, and seeing more stories like this is only concluding and confirming my skepticism on climate change even further than it currently is. But to have my opinions on climate change is nothing like about my opinions on our environment and preserving wildlife. That I'm all for. It's just climate change it's complicated in my opinion. To talk about clean energy industries and export growth over climate response, like just trying to go for clean energy, again, actually, I'm somewhat for that, yet at the same time, we shouldn't just only go for wind power or solar power. What about hydraulic power, like using the river streams to power homes and businesses, and also trying to balance and also to balance the diversification of clean energy? You have wind, hydropower, solar power, and geothermal power as well. I have nothing against green energy or clean energy. It's just don't just rely on one type of renewable energy. You gotta diversify. It has as many alternative modes of renewable energy sources as possible. So if one system fails, the others take over and continue producing power. And if two sources of power of renewable energy sources go down, whatever energy sources are left can still keep going, although it may not produce as much electricity. The important thing is, electricity is still being produced. Paramedics sent to train derailment in Cumbria as rail services affected. About 90 passengers and crew were rescued from a high-speed London-bound train that derailed in Cumbria. Avanti West Coast confirmed its 4:28 a.m. service from Glasgow Central to Euston have come off the tracks shortly after 6 a.m. after calling at Penrith. It is thought that a landslip caused by severe weather was a factor in the derailment. Pictures from the scene showed the train had remained upright rather than toppling on its side, suggesting the passengers had a lucky escape. The train had sustained damage to its front end and appeared to have come to a halt between the northbound and southbound tracks. The electric-powered Pendolino trains are typically 11 carriages long when running between Scotland and London and travels at speeds of up to 125 miles per hour on the West Coast Main Line. The immediate priority was getting the passengers safely off the train. According to Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander, this has been achieved by 10 a.m., the Standard was told. Northwest Ambulance Service sent paramedics to the scene near the village of Shap. Miss Alexander said a major incident had been declared, but there are no reported injuries. She told LBC Radio, "I have been informed of this incident within the last half an hour or so. We will work swiftly to make sure that people can get off the train safely." The Pendolino trains, which tilt to enable them to travel as quickly as possible, can carry up to 600 passengers, though only 86 plus train crew were on board for 28 a.m. service at the time of the derailment due to the early morning departure. The service would have picked up passengers at Carlisle at 5:42 a.m. and Penrith North Lakes at 5:59, and would have been due at Oxenholme at 6:23 a.m. The train had been due in at Euston at 9 a.m. Derailments are rare on the UK railways, and the incident will be investigated by the Rail Accident Investigation Branch. A Network Rail spokesperson said at midday on Monday, all passengers have now been evacuated following this morning's train derailment near Shap, in Cumbria. There are no major injuries to passengers or staff. The incident followed a suspected landslip in the area, which has been experiencing significant adverse weather conditions, and extremely heavy rainfall continues to compound the issue. Our dedicated teams are working to get trains back up and running as quickly as we can. We are working with the Rail Accident Investigation Branch to establish the cause of the derailment. I feel like I've read this story before. Yeah, I read this story before. I don't know why I feel like I've seen this story already. Either way, yeah, I don't see how it is common to have railways in the UK be derailed like that. However, at least procedure and response has been put into it, and passengers, thankfully, are not injured whatsoever, so thank goodness. And yeah, again, not like this is going to happen again. However, you never know that any event in this world is possible to happen, even people believe it is very, very unlikely. You can never be too sure of yourself that things are not that will or will not be likely to happen. Spotify to add music videos to streaming platform. On November 12th, Spotify said it will add music videos in the coming weeks for paying subscribers in the United States and Canada. The NMPA confirmed that Spotify signed an audiovisual direct licensing pact and launched the NMPA opt-in portal, open November 11th, with onboarding through December 19th for expanding AV rights. Earlier rollouts demonstrated music videos beta tested in nearly 100 markets last year, with chart metrics saying, on average, these videos garnered 374 million views, whereas the tracks